Hello everyone, so we're here talking about the High Renaissance, the Venetian Renaissance, and Mannerism today. So when we are starting here, we are going to be focusing on the High Renaissance. This is all part of Content Area 3. We're looking at the Renaissance to Baroque in this unit. So we're going to focus in on High Renaissance, which is part of the Italian Renaissance. We're looking at around 1500, 1530, primarily focused on a few big players that were in northern Italy at the time, our Leonardo da Vinci, our Michelangelo, and our Raphael. So a lot of stuff is going to happen during the High Renaissance that really shifts it from that Proto-Renaissance, early Renaissance, kind of scratching the surface of what the Renaissance is, and then pushing it into something that we think of today as the Renaissance. So a few things that are happening in the background are things like papal patronage. Anytime you see the word papal or papacy or any other pronunciation of that, we're talking about the Pope. So the Pope is going to be one of the major patrons in the High Renaissance and around that Renaissance period. We're looking at Pope Julius II at this time. He's going to commission a lot of pieces, and he's commissioning these great artists of Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael. I'm going to keep saying those three because those are the three in our High Renaissance. So we get a lot of these big projects because the Pope is the head honcho of the church. Church has tons of money right now, which is going to kind of lead into our North Renaissance Baroque breakdown of what the Renaissance is and shift gears away from just pure Catholicism. We'll get there when we get there. But these High Renaissance artists are focusing a lot on perspective, on anatomy, on that logic and the reason and the mathematics and engineering and all of those more finite things that the early Renaissance began building. But in the 1400s, early 1500s, that's where we're really cementing this. You'll see a lot of references to Vitruvius and this idea of a Vitruvian man. That's coming back to like Greece and Rome and that mathematical ideal proportion. So think back to spear-bearer Doryphorus and how he measured like every individual part of the body, like down to the knuckle. Same thing is happening here in the Renaissance. Renaissance's rebirth, we're bringing back all of those concepts, just with a little Christian flair now. So a reminder again that Renaissance does mean rebirth, like I said. But another thing that's really interesting is that we're bringing back Greece and Rome, we're putting a Christian twist, but at the same time, we're getting this rise of secularism, which means not religious. So yes, Christianity is the kind of the style and the aesthetic almost for these artists, but not all these artists subscribe to all the religious doctrine like they did prior in the Gothic era, even the like Proto-Renaissance. It's really shifting towards more secular thinking, secular art, especially when we get to Northern Renaissance. Secularism is going to be very important. Some background things that are going to kind of change everything. Protestant Reformation. We'll talk more about Protestant Reformation with Northern Renaissance, but the Catholic Church is going to have some competition here because of some corruption that happens. There's key figures like Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., different people. He's going to kind of kickstart this split of Catholicism and then what becomes known as Protestantism. So we'll get there when we get there. Another thing that's going to happen is that Rome is going to get sacked by the end of High Renaissance era. So Rome is going to be a key place for these artists. They kind of move a lot of their art to Rome from just Florence, just Venice. But by the end of High Renaissance, we see Rome getting attacked and dismantled again. Yay! It's important to note that Rome is very close to Vatican City, where the Pope is. As far as the three art movements we're talking about here, it's all kind of overlapping. That's why I'm bunching them up together. High Renaissance, 1500 to 1530-ish or 1520-ish, depends on the historian. It's mostly taking place in Rome, like I said. It's mostly commissioned by the Pope. And we're looking at those really Greek Roman aesthetic to the nth degree with our Ninja Turtles. Venetian Renaissance is, it overlaps the High Renaissance, but it's happening in Venice. So around 1500 to 1550-ish. They're typically using more oil paint. They're using greens and golds, and they're really about sensuality and drunkenness and leisure and chillin'. We're gonna have one Venetian Renaissance that kind of captures all of that. And then Mannerism is gonna be one of my favorite art movements. I love it. It's so funky. It's going to be a response to the High Renaissance, where they kind of get tired of everything having to be so perfect. And they're going to play with that idea of what the rules are and what perfection is. So a little counter movement there. Some key ideas that are going to kickstart a lot of what makes the High Renaissance so different from the early Renaissance. We've talked about this in class, just want to go over it briefly again. Feel free to fast forward. We have chiaroscuro. So chiaroscuro literally means light dark. This is using strong contrast to create value through modeling. Modeling is just that idea of making things look three-dimensional, giving it form. And they're doing it through value, through shading. And the higher the contrast, the more like dramatic it looks. So they really take on this love of the chiaroscuro, bringing back that shading, not making it look really flat. You've probably used chiaroscuro. We love to do high contrast. High contrast is fun. Another big technique, this is going to be locked around Da Vinci, but he's going to really change the game for people, is sfumato. Sfumato means to vanish like smoke. So if you're looking at paintings like Mona Lisa by Da Vinci, if you look real close, there's not a ton of line work. There's no outlines like we saw in Botticelli's Birth of Venus. There's some lines, of course, always loving the lines, but it's got a haziness to it. It's not clear, because in real life, when you look at people, you look at things, you don't see thick outlines everywhere or even thin outlines. It's got this blend of out of focusness. So Da Vinci really tries to capture this idea of kind of out of focus, using this hazy technique to add atmosphere to his pieces. Beyond just atmospheric perspective, you can see that going on. It's lighter in the background, but there's even more haziness in the background. A smoke, a less clarity. Really fascinating technique that really changes the game. And then this one, tenebrism. This is more Baroque. Just want to introduce it now so that we can separate chiaroscuro and tenebrism, because we see chiaroscuro, there's modeling through high contrast, but tenebrism specifically is using this kind of darkened background and bringing the darks into bodies or the subject matter to have that even stronger highlight and shadowed contrast. Very high contrast. Tenebrism's very dramatic. Usually when you go into a museum, you see those tenebrist pieces and you kind of stop and you're like, whoa, what's that? And it draws you in because it's kind of like a stage, in a stage play where the background is all dark and you just see the actors. So we'll get back to tenebrism when we start talking about Baroque. All right. So now to get into our big artists, our big three, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, our High Renaissance guys. So the pieces that they chose for the art history test, I don't think capture, the whole of the artist very much. So I kind of want to deviate a little bit, talk a little bit more about these artists because they're fascinating, really genius, like all the artists that we have are, but these ones are the ones that we know just through cultural osmosis, basically. There's his signature right there. So Leonardo da Vinci, the piece we have is The Last Supper, but before we get to Last Supper, let's take a look at Da Vinci the man. So here's self-portrait and a piece that was done of him. So you can kind of see this very, typical old man aesthetic. He's always often identified with the beard. That will be important when we get to Raphael's piece. If you want to see his pieces in real up close, finite detail, check out Google Arts and Culture. You can zoom in so far that the paint you could see cracking. It's so cool. You could see hairbrush or brushes, the hair from the brushes on the painting. So Leonardo, like the other high Renaissance artists, are these Renaissance men, is the term, where they're good at a ton of things, and not just good, I mean like good. So Leonardo was mostly known for being a painter. These are some of his famous works. We'll get to some of the others in a second. I always loved her. I did a copy of her in 8th grade because I liked her so much. But beyond a painter, he's also a scientist. He took lots of anatomical notes. He did a lot of mathematics and engineering. We'll get to the engineering in a second. And just really kind of trying to understand the world on a deeper scientific level, because logic and reason has been brought back from Greece with modern technology, modern for this time. He's able to really dive even further than what was available during Greece and Rome. And part of that is because he broke the law. So Da Vinci, the best way to learn, the insides of a human is to look at the insides of a human. And from these notes, which he all did backwards, which is super fun if you look at it, it's all done backwards. From these notes and these drawings, we can see that he clearly did some dissections. Dissections were not allowed. They were prohibited because it's wrong to take a dead body and destroy it in a Christian world. That's very gross. That's unholy. It's not right, which you can even argue today is the same. But he breaks the law. He sneaks in, gets corpses, or makes some deals with people so that he can dissect their body and really dive in and understand people and how anatomy works. And his drawings become a lot more lifelike than our prior entries because he literally knows how every single muscle and tendon is working in every situation. So it's better to know the inside out of a human to draw better and to paint better than to just guess it or use just the references. So he pushes it. Speaking of pushing things, he was also an inventor. So famously, he kind of invented the first tank you could see down there, first helicopter, another prototype of a flying machine. He had all these ideas and he had the engineering skills to really back it up. They didn't come to fruition because building a bunch of tanks that look like this would get you a little bit of attention. With only just a minor adjustments, all of these things pretty much work. There's some great YouTube videos of people rebuilding his design. So very spectacular, very smart. Thank God we didn't get any tanks earlier than when we did. That would have been very genocidal at some point. But he was thinking. He was a thinking man. My favorite thing is that he was also a lefty. If you look at those strokes there, that's the signature of a left-handed person. They're angling the brush strokes and the pen marks that direction instead of right-handed, the other direction. So just going through some pieces. Here's that self-portrait again. Here's that invention again. You could see, oh look, it's a horse-drawn chopping machine. Scary. But, when people are asking him to do things, of course he's going to do it. We like money. Here's a spring machine. So there's some of those muscle anatomical studies he did. This is his Vitruvian Man, very, very famous, all mathematically proportioned. Look at the knee. That man has seen the inside of a knee. He also did a lot of character studies and studies of faces for expressions. If you're an artist, definitely draw some studies of some expressions. Don't leave your people looking all cute all the time. Lots and lots of different sketches. Luckily, we still have a lot of his work because he was revered at the time. Some of his other paintings. There's that one I like so much. little bit one of his earlier works. I always liked this like veil on her shirt, that kind of separation where you could barely see it, the delicacy of that. You can see that sfumato technique starting to kind of take over. It's not 100% there yet, but it's not as liney, and you see that haziness. Another famous one, the ermine right there, is a little weasel ferret guy, super cute. Very Da Vinci in the face here. My go-to sign, and you'll see it with Mona Lisa too, of what a Da Vinci is. Like if I'm just sitting in a museum, how can I tell, is it a Da Vinci or not? And my clue is always this shadow right here. For whatever reason, he really likes to emphasize that little section. And, you know, there's a shadow there, but the way he does it, minimal eyebrows and that darker shadow, it always calls out, oh, that's Da Vinci to me. You can see it definitely on Mona Lisa. Speaking of, it's Mona Lisa. Hey, we know Mona Lisa. Surprisingly, she is not the one in the 250 that was chosen. Excellent piece. Probably the most famous artwork of all time. And I usually get the question of why? Why do we care about Mona Lisa? Why did people think that she's so amazing? What's up with her? She's just another portrait. Well, there's a lot of deep answer there. One of the things is the fact that Da Vinci was well renowned at the time already. He was very well known. I mean, look at his prior work. He's moving and a grooving, right? So there's already gonna be attention on him. However, you can watch this video if you're curious, but I'm gonna fast forward. However, if you're comparing the Mona Lisa to portraitures before it, you can really see that shift, that tradition change, going from profile, very kind of simple, not super modeled, kind of flat, still a great painting, but to the Mona Lisa. She's so well shaded. You see the little light around her chin there. The hands feel so delicate. The little coy smile, the background, the sfumato, the tiny veil on her head. Like everything is coming together so precisely that it looks effortless. A couple other things that really make her stand out is that little smile. Everyone talks about Mona Lisa's smile. Think about how these portraits were done. These people that they were painting would have to sit for studies or for long periods of time to be drawn/painted, depending on the artist's process. So typically you're not gonna smile for longer than 5 minutes without being uncomfortable. So Da Vinci really kind of, because he knew anatomy, could really capture that smile even forever and ever after, you know, he wasn't looking at that model anymore. We have that 3/4 view, which is so different than the strong profile. She's kind of side-eye looking at the audience, capturing their attention, very different than the looking off and not, you know, connecting to people. All that beautiful linear perspective that is all perfectly accurate. Seeing a little bit more of the body, that pyramid composition that Da Vinci likes to do. I'll show that in a little bit. Just compositionally amazing, fascinating, colors are beautiful. It's just very, very rich. Speaking of colors, here's a recreation of what they think the colors probably looked a little bit closer to when he originally painted. It's hard to know for sure, but oil paint, you put a varnish on it, that varnish tends to yellow over time. Also, Mona Lisa was a little bit larger. There was an incident when she was stolen and they, you know, slice her out of the canvas, out of the frame. So, big yikes. Here's another one of my favorite Da Vinci pieces. You can see that pyramid style composition there a little bit better. And you can see how he's using different flesh tones. This is all, I don't know, not the best example because of that yellowed varnish. He's using a lot more relative color than just yellows, but you can see how he's using the shadows. Here's a figure study he did for that exact painting, so he changed it up a lot. Here's another one of his Madonna pieces where the composition is insane. There's that pyramid, where it's taking the idea of that triangle, that kind of bottom heavy composition, and extending it outward. It gives a better sense of like foundation and stability while adding even more like almost perspective to it, and just more grandeur than before. So the triangle composition looks great. Love a triangle composition, but making these characters, these people, kind of move together in a more realistic way while still maintaining that mathematical composition is very impressive work. Da Vinci composition to like crazy. So yes, there is that pyramid, but there's also circle, 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 where everything kind of lines up in this perfect harmony. You have it broken into rule of thirds, and then the pyramid taking up kind of a square within that rule of thirds, and then triangle on the bottom so that Christ down there is guiding through the blessing, even though our focal point is Mary. So that's a lot of preemptive stuff about Da Vinci. Now finally getting to our piece from the 250 with Last Supper. So, Last Supper, really fascinating piece. Because Da Vinci, being an inventor, being a scientist, he liked to experiment, so we're going to get into how The Last Supper is both a success and a failure as far as an experiment goes. It was made 1494 to 1498. It is oil and tempera. Oil, tempera. Tempera made out of egg. I don't know about you guys, but when I want to cook an egg and not let it stick to my pan, I put oil down, because oil and egg don't stick together. I wonder if that's going to be a problem. So, I pulled this meme like literally 2 seconds. Sorry, awkward side. We're seeing Last Supper be a really pivotal point in our New Testament stories of Christ is telling his apostles that one of you will betray me. And this whole scene is them reacting to that announcement. So knowing that it's reaction, it's kind of fun to see how people have always been people and how they react to each other. So if we're looking at the full piece, gosh, it's beautiful. We'll get into the compositional stuff here, but there's Christ in the center. Linear perspective for days, gorgeous, gorgeous linear perspective. And then the 12 apostles all grouped into like threes. This is how big it is. So you get a sense of that scale. Oh, that's unfortunate, and we'll talk about that. And then it would have been painted even more. It has been restored. We'll talk about the restoration. Here's some sketches that he did. Again, he did some character studies to really get a feeling of the emotions that he wants to portray, and you can see how different it ends up kind of being. A lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. Like, especially this guy. That's me today on a Monday. Loving it. Seeing a lot of different figures. The important one here is going to be Judas. If you know anything about the stories of Christ, of the 12 apostles, Judas is the one to betray Christ, and he gives him up to the Romans, who then take Christ and crucify him. So it is Judas who is the one to kind of give it up for money, and how he's being portrayed is tied into that. Last Supper has been a scene that has been portrayed a ton of times. This is not a Da Vinci, but you can see that we're getting that sense of the 12 apostles, Christ in the center, lots of different portrayals of this scene throughout all of time. Here's an older photo of Last Supper. You'll notice the colors are very different. We'll talk about that in a second. Here's some close-ups. Unfortunately, it has lost some bits of itself to time. Some more close-ups. More All of those little specks are the paint chipping. Now, if we're looking at the Last Supper through the lens of tradition and change, we're going to ground it with talking about tradition and change from other Last Supper pieces. So traditionally, if we look at the visuals, we have Christ in the center, or traditionally he's either in the center or kind of separated, and he's has his disciples around him. Very normal setup. Unfortunately, another tradition is that Judas has a darker complexion, and he's grabbing a money bag. So Judas was bribed, hence the money bag. So that's often in the portrayals. But something that happens frequently, not necessarily in these two, is that Judas is shown as darker skinned. Couple reasons for that. Number one, visually to contrast him with the rest of the apostles. And B, racism. Unfortunately, there's, we get a lot of the seeds of white people better in Europe and dark-skinned people are worse, and anything other than that makes people upset. It is exactly what you think. So oftentimes Judas is portrayed with that darker complexion because he is the traitor. He is the one that's not to be trusted, and that is unfortunately tied to that racism issue in Europe, which will carry over into the Americas in the pieces that we will talk about eventually. Continuing forth on the traditions, we're looking at this place which is known as a refectory, which is a dining hall for monks. So the painting itself, if I go back here for a second, you see it in this little, this little building. This is a dining hall. Oftentimes, the Last Supper is going to be put in the dining hall because they're eating food, Last Supper. So you're thinking and you're internalizing it to be like, yes, I'm eating my lunch and I'm just enjoying my soup because I like soup. But as you're eating your soup, you're looking up at Christ, who gave everything for your sins to be cleaned. And you're like, man, now I need to do better than just sit here and eat my soup. I have to be a better person and be the best monk I could be. So that's kind of the function, right? Is to, not propaganda, but kind of propaganda. It's more that reminder of be good, right? The people in the refectory are already monks. They're already Christians. They're not kind of trying to bring more people into Christianity in this piece. But it is that nice reminder to think about yourself and your actions. More traditions, tables laid out horizontally. It's a lot of figures to try to get in, so it's usually a horizontal composition. And we do see that linear and atmospheric perspective that has now been in Italy for a hot second. I keep scrolling back and forth. I apologize. So you can see atmospheric perspective in the background. See the light. There's the atmospheric. Linear perspective, you can clearly, I'll show it, see the vanishing point kind of coming right towards Christ's head, where every single horizontal line that leads to that vanishing point is all mathematically correct. Alright, contextually, Last Supper is often depicted. It's been one of those big scenes in a lot of Christian art. We know this. Monks are typically looking at the Last Supper while they eat, mention that, in order to inspire contemplation. So that's very traditional. That is something that monks are used to doing, is seeing the Last Supper while they chomping on their lunch. We do also see this unity because of its placement through the earthly and the mortal world, as well as the eternal and the divine world, where we can see both, here's this divine moment, but it's being portrayed in a dining hall. Here's Christ telling his apostles, these big figures in Christianity, but they're reacting in a very human way. They are not separate from people, but they kind of are. There's that kind of veil between earth and heavens. Just like we saw in a lot of our Asian pieces, where like the Buddha kind of walks that line too between the earthly and the divine. Lady Di's banner, that earthly and the divine, kind of just floating back in that weird gray area between them. It is a great moment, but it's also a very real moment. So very traditional. Now, we get into the change and why the Last Supper was picked because of all these changes. Sorry for gross font choices, my bad. So when we're looking at change, starting with the visuals, Peter and John are two of the major apostles, and they tend to be right on like both sides of Christ. Instead, they're kind of like just to his right side. So the apostles now are being treated a little bit more equally than just it's Peter, it's John, the ones he kind of more grew up with, and then the rest. So now they're all a little bit more human. We also see, instead of just grouping all 12 together and sitting or looking super samey, we have 4 distinct groups of 3. They're talking, they're debating, they're kind of getting upset at each other, like who's going to betray who. They're reacting. We have these very individualized figures and faces. They all have accurate proportions, accurate lighting. We're seeing that chiaroscuro with the light and the dark. And that sense of drama is really coming through, where you didn't have that before. It was just, here's these 12 guys that all look the same staring at Christ. Boring. Da Vinci's like, let's not make it boring anymore. He also brings in that sfumato technique, so everyone feels more grounded, more real. There's that sense of smokiness. So we get big gestures, big actions. Do I have it? Nope, I'm going back again. Now I know. Gotta have a slide a little bit closer. Whee, my favorite. All right, so there you see the groups of 3s, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You have Christ in the center, right? And then you have that linear perspective. Here's Peter and John, and then Judas. So you can see they're not right next to Christ. That's big. That's very different. And you can see how reactionary this guy's pointing up. Like, your dad really gonna let someone betray you? John's thinking about, it's not me. Judas is like, what? Who could do it? I wouldn't know. So you all have this very human reaction versus, look, he's sleeping. Even when they were being pushed a little bit more, because this one had a lot of change, it's not as dramatic. This is very liney. This is not chiaroscuro. This is not sfumato. Where you have that sense of realism, even with the paint being chipped and gone. Look at that debate they're having. You hear the conversation just through gesture. And Christ is just like, yep, this is gonna happen. It's too bad, isn't it? So all of those reactions. Like that one, it always kills me. There's that just emotional moment. All right. That perspective, again, is very perfect. Where it was a little funky before. Sometimes they would do the perspective, especially Italy was doing perspective already, but it wasn't like this clean, because we have this mural, it's like 15 feet up in the air, and yet it feels right standing from below. So Da Vinci accounted for, where people were looking in the room, so that it felt right to the viewers. The audience is being thought of within the map, just like the Parthenon having that, illusion of perfection through imperfection. So we have the strong sense of depth. We have atmospheric and linear. It's very unified composition. We'll get into the composition in a second to show off how much that visually changed. Some more visual changes is the dum-dum move. I can't call Da Vinci dumb. He was very successful. But putting oil and tempera together wasn't the best. Someone had to experiment, right? The worst part is that it's oil and tempera on plaster. We played around with the fresco. Fresco hard. Fresco is kind of crazy already, but then to take oil paint and tempera paint together and put it on top of that plaster is just a nightmare to me. I just noticed that it auto-corrected to tempura. That's really funny. Little shrimpy baby. I'm going to fix it right now. This is a great time to fix it. Tempura, not tempura. So Da Vinci experimented. He put oil and tempera on plaster together. He wanted the softness of tempera, which he typically used, and the richness of color with oil. And this is a mural, so it's gonna have some fresco element to it because that's what sticks on the wall. So he played around with that, experimented, added double layer of dried plaster to get even more detail, and really honed in on this experimental combo. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Oil and tempera do not mix, and especially not on plaster. So the piece has been falling apart since it's basically been put up with tons of artists that have went in and just kept painting over it. So much so that it got painted over so many times that it didn't even look like the artwork anymore. I'll show that in a second. Some other key things visually that are crazy is that there's no halos. There is no clear halo in any of these figures. That's insane. We went from the circle disc to the thin halo that's angled to nothing. Big, big change. However, we're not ignoring the holiness of Christ. Compositionally, there's a little pediment right above his head. That's his halo. Secret architecture halo. So we still have that idea, and we still have him being the focal point through every compositional element Da Vinci uses. We also have some secret symbols. 3 is going to keep coming back. 3 is important because of the Holy Trinity, right? The body, no, I lost it. The ghost, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There you go. Got it. The Holy Trinity, right? So you have boom, boom, boom. 3 sections. You have 1, 2, 3 windows. You have the 4 groups of 3. And Christ is a triangle. His arms are out. Boom, boom, boom. Trinity. Lots of 3s. Magical number. Very divine. Contextually, Leonardo was the one that really experimented with media often. So he got the sfumato technique through experimentation. He often mixed his pigment with media a little bit more to have that translucent quality that would add to that haziness. The dramatic poses and the emotions all kind of came from that humanist perspective. These were people. Yes, they're divine beings, but they were also people. Let's focus on them being people. So they're not all the same. They're not above us. They're one of us. We have that missing halo, again, showing that human aspect of Christ. Christ is the human son. He's supposed to feel connected to us. So don't remove him completely. And then I talked about these as well already, but Da Vinci really loved the human body, nature, and all the minute details of people that showed and reflected the inner workings, the soul. So everything that he did was to gain a better understanding of people. He loved people. So he dissected those cadavers, those dead bodies, to understand anatomy. This was seen as a sin, but he wasn't a very religious man. So to him, it was more worth getting to know people through these dissections than to risk going to hell. Da Vinci did also practice with live models. Not all of his knowledge came from dead people. But live models were not often used. They were used in the Renaissance, so that's kind of a continuation of our early Renaissance stuff, but we're using those live models much more often. The idea of observation is so crucial to understanding how the world works. I always tell people when I teach them drawing and painting, draw what you see, not what you think you see. Because the world in front of us is different than the world inside of our mind. Our brains are great. They're really cool. They like to make things up all the time. But boy, oh, the amount of art that I have done where I'm like, I know how to draw a horse, and then you do it without looking at a horse. Woof, that mind horse, she ain't cute. So observation is the pinnacle of learning how to draw, to paint accurately to life. We also see Da Vinci approaching this Last Supper scene as a narrative. It's not just this one frozen moment of time. There's a wider scene, the emotions, the humanity, the gestures. It feels like there's more going on. There's a story here. This is humans arguing and talking. It's not just the apostles and Christ. We have this idealized geometry where Jesus is kind of in the center. He's being idealized, but it's not in the same way. It's in this very Neoplatonist way. Neoplatonism was also in Birth of Venus, and Neoplatonism kind of refers to that idea of taking Plato's ideas from Greece, mixing it with Christianity to kind of focus again on that humanist, on the beauty of the world, and what makes people tick. So Plato thought the mortal realm, that's imperfect. Divine is heavenly, it's geometric perfection. So Da Vinci is depicting Christ as a human in this very beautiful, kind of thoughtful human way, and yet his geometry is so perfected and the composition is perfected around him that he is divine through math. Very Plato. We love divine math. If only math could come to us divinely, right? Ooh, this is very fascinating stuff. The pictures. So, the condition of the Last Supper, she ain't cute. It's not doing well. But we have some really, close calls through history. Number one, the reason why it's falling apart is Da Vinci's experiment. Oil and tempera, they don't do it. But also, the fact that it's in the side of a cafeteria, right? It's a refectory. You see the little, cutout? It's cut out because it's a door. After Da Vinci painted it, the monks cut a door into the Last Supper. They were like, it's fine. It's just the table with Christ's feet. It's good. So, boom. They cut out a door. Rip. So, paint's falling off, door got cut out, and then World War II happens. And the whole building gets bombed. However, this is the amazing part. The whole building gets bombed, but the wall that remains is the one with the Last Supper on it. It makes it. Last Supper survives World War II, and so much art is destroyed during World War II. It is a blessing that it made it through being literally bombed. Other issues have been pollution, have mucked up the walls, and people walking in to see the Last Supper. I'll be one of them eventually. You gotta see the Last Supper. But when you have a bunch of overcrowded visitors seeing it every single day, your breath is gonna bleh onto the walls, the moisture in the air from people sweating. Gross, right? So the Last Supper, she's not gonna live forever. She's made it 500 years. Will she make 500 more? Who knows? About almost half of it is Leonardo's work. About 17% is totally gone. And then 40% of the Last Supper is actually not Da Vinci at all. They did do a big restoration. So, what they do is, over time, artists are trying their best. They're trying to hold up Last Supper. Because this Last Supper is Da Vinci's work. We gotta save his mural. So artists are painting and painting and painting and painting over it. So much so, in order to keep it, this doesn't even look like a Da Vinci anymore. Look at that face. Look at those bright colors. So they take the Last Supper and they decide, it was a big controversial move. Do we take off the paint of the artist that painted over the Last Supper. They went back and forth, decided, yes, if we want to actually see Da Vinci's painting as he intended, we're gonna have to strip all the excess paint. So they do this big old project to strip it, and that's what gets us to this. Wildly different feeling from these two. Look at Christ's face there versus Da Vinci's Christ's face there. That's where, again, you can see that there's a little shadow. The emotion that Da Vinci captures versus the artist that went in afterwards. Very flat. Still great painting. Like, they did what they could, but they ain't a Da Vinci. That's where you see that difference. Look at the face there. Look at the face there. The anguish. So big, crazy difference. In your notes, by the way, if you go ahead, flip that one page that is just the Last Supper, we're going to take a look at some compositional stuff. So now that we have tradition change out, just to really show how amazing and mathematical this is and how Neoplatonist it is, we have to look at the composition. So a lot of things are going to be happening here. Boop. I don't know why. All right. Very first thing is linear perspective. I want you drawing, you don't have to draw every single one of the lines, but give me a couple lines on the paper that show like the top of the doors down to Christ's head, which is the vanishing point. The top of the, ceiling, Christ's head. Look at those panes, those coffers going down to Christ's head. Christ's arms going to Christ's head. Everything localizes at the top of Christ's head. So Da Vinci starts by putting that vanishing point right where Christ is. Naturally, your eyes are going to focus on the vanishing point, hence putting it where Christ is the ultimate choice. Then we're seeing some rule of thirds. So rule of thirds is it's a little funky. This is not the best image, so you don't have to draw this one. Rule of thirds is you divide your paper into 3 by 3, and where the intersections are the important points or within those windows. So Christ is in the center there. Again, don't draw this one. It's nasty. We do have this beautiful negative space between Christ and John and Peter and Judas, right? So you're putting this space between the key figures that are right here and Christ. Where they're interacting, this is more insular. This is where most of the story is being told. So putting that there allows us to shift here before we shift here, typically. This is the one I definitely want you guys drawing, so I want you either highlighting or using your marker, draw a little triangle to show that Christ is in that triangular shape. And then circle the groups of 3 so you can see and understand that it's 4 groups of 3. And you can kind of see that they're all kind of reacting similar within those groups. This conversation here, circling around Judas, this kind of listening in because they're like, what's happening? This very reactionary look towards Christ, and then this reaction to each other, that outstretched hand like, can you believe this? You must be lying. What's actually happening? And the kind of just focusing. It's all different sort of reactions. Here's that linear perspective again, so you can kind of see, but look at their faces. Only a couple figures are looking away from Christ. Here, and then this group here. Because most figures are looking this way, we're back towards looking at Christ. And you can see how awkward Judas actually is compositionally. He's not looking towards anyone. He's looking up. He's thinking about his choices and thinking about those regrets. Potentially. And then here is that pediment. I do want you highlighting that pediment right above Christ's head. You could barely see it, but there is a clear rounded pediment that is echoing that halo. I want you to label that halo as well. So go ahead, highlight, label that piece halo. Because that is the only reference to the halo that we get, is that pediment there. See, you can see the door. Look at the door. Oh, they cut out the door. We'll never see Christ's feet. All right. So Last Supper, crazy, intense. I could keep going on and on and on. But we don't have time. I've already taken up too much time. Moving on to Michelangelo. All right. Michelangelo. He is such a funny guy. As an artist, he very dramatic, very salty. The attitude-wise, kind of hates everything and everyone, but still likes art so much that he gets over it. Da Vinci was more that kind of stoic, thought about everything and just painted and invented and did his own thing. Michelangelo was mostly whining and complaining to himself because he did do a lot of hard work. I enjoy Michelangelo. He is a butt, and I'm here for it. All right, so Michelangelo. The piece that we have for Michelangelo is the Sistine Chapel, which is a bunch, like a ton of frescoes. Fresco. So when you're looking at this, please remember fresco, because holy crud. I was just painting a ceiling yesterday, and it was just wall paint, and I wanted to die, because looking up sucks, and having paint drip on you sucks. So I feel Michelangelo's pain here. We'll get into that first, but I wanted to talk a bit about Michelangelo, just as we did with Da Vinci. In your notes, you'll just see that section called Michelangelo. I didn't mention it with Da Vinci, sorry. Anything that you find interesting, feel free to jot down. We are going to be doing an activity when I come back, so leave a space on that Michelangelo page for that activity. Just like half the sheet, that's all we need. Everywhere else you can take notes. Alright, so Portrait of Michelangelo. This is what he looks like. Here's painting and then a print of it afterwards, because you gotta know what your famous Ninja Turtles look like. So very different look than Da Vinci right off the bat. He was a lot like younger in general. Most of his crazy famous artwork he did in his 20s, which makes, you know, artists feel fun and inadequate. But he also a Renaissance man, where Da Vinci was the painter, inventor, scientist, plus others. Michelangelo was really more in the 3D realm. He was an architect. He loved the engineering and the mathematics. This is a piece that he did. Look, he did domes too. So Brunelleschi started the dome thing, and everyone was like, oh yeah, I like domes again. And he would plan a lot of the interior spaces as well, and he would incorporate sculpture with his architectural work. He's not like known for his architecture, but he loved doing architecture. He was a painter, so this is from Sistine Chapel, so that's a fresco. And he would paint these very bold, dramatic, muscular, we'll get into the musculature in a bit, styles were typically, with painting, Michelangelo's style is very, very high Renaissance, very detailed, very modeled. It's not that sfumato look. There's not that haziness. It's very bright. The blues tend to be very bright. I notice a lot with Michelangelo's work, but I really tend to look at that muscle structure. So he does a lot of studies as well, and he does a lot of studies from real life, like Da Vinci did. Da Vinci was known for doing the anatomical work, and these guys were talking. They were hanging out. They're peers, like each other, don't like each other, doesn't matter. They're interacting. So this is not them existing within their own sphere. So Da Vinci's work kind of goes on to the other high Renaissance artists. What Michelangelo prided himself in the most was his sculpting. He was a sculptor, 100%. Even the way he painted, he described painting as approaching it as a sculpture. You sculpt the figures out of paint, not literally, but the way you approach painting as a sculptor is very different than if you're just a painter. I'll show you that eventually because I do that where I kind of approach it like a sculptor. You kind of build the figures instead of paint the light and the shadow. It's really fascinating. So he did a lot of sculpture over time, reliefs, freestanding, etc. I just picked 3 Mary and Christ to kind of show off. This one, though, she's something special. So this is the Pietà, one of my favorite pieces. Unfortunately, not in the 250, but Michelangelo captures people, anatomy, clothing, figures, space out of marble as if they could just stand up and walk away. I think more so than any of the Greeks or Romans ever could. He gets it on such a genius level. I can't even fathom it, that this is stone. How is this stone? Where we last left this idea of the Pietà was the Röntgen Pietà, something that was very much more emotional, especially for its time. We had the blood gushing, we had Mary looking sad and Christ being super dead, but this shows that difference between Gothic to Renaissance. The focus on Christianity first versus anatomy, realism, humanism first. This is more human than other Gothic art, but this is humanist. So here's another look at the Pietà. Look at that. The fabric folds out of marble. And it's not like clay where you're adding these pieces on. It all has to be carved into the surface. Another famous piece that Michelangelo did, again out of marble, was David. We talked about Donatello's David. This is a very different representation of David. This is very much more classical. He's contrapposto. We even see that kind of reference to Rome and how they would hold up the leg because marble is heavy. But we see all the tiny details in the muscles. That hand is what always, to me, separates just that pure genius, skill, observational abilities. Because that muscle right there, the muscle and the vein only shows when the pinky is bent exactly like that. So it's not just guesswork. He knows every anatomical thing. Here's that close-up face, that scrunched eyebrows. Not that placid, boyish Donatello's David, but something a little bit more aggressive. He would have been placed at the top of the building that it was commissioned for. So he actually messed with the proportions on purpose. So if you actually look at it, his hands are quite large. It's just like the Parthenon. It's the illusion of perfection if David was standing high up. The head, too big. He's emphasizing the hands and the head because that's where the story is for David. Everything is anatomically accurate, but the proportions are stretched and manipulated. Because again, it was going to go up on a roof. Unfortunately, for Michelangelo, who was not happy about this decision, the person who commissioned it loved it so much that he's like, no, we can't put it on top of a roof. No one's gonna see it. We gotta put it on the floor. So it would have been way high up, and now it sits on the ground. Theoretically, it's in a museum, but it sat on the ground in front of the building instead. And Michelangelo was like, no, my proportions are wrong. Why would you do that to me? He now sits inside of a museum, standing in the middle of a niche, getting all the light, a little bit high up, but not to the level Michelangelo wanted. This is what he looked like in front of the building before he was moved to museum. He did have a leaf. That's not just like a thing cartoons do. There was a period, I believe it was like pre-Victorian era around then, where a lot of artworks, they were like, we can't show anything that's inappropriate, so they started putting leaves on all the sculptures. They started painting veils and leaves on top of paintings. Like, everywhere. Didn't matter who the artist was. This is Michelangelo, and they're adding a leaf. So the leaf was removed when he was put in the museum. Also, crazy thing happened to poor David. In 1991, a person just walked into the museum with a hammer, walked up, smashed David's little pinky toe. Just started just going at it. Just hitting the foot with the hammer. He was apprehended and arrested. David is okay, but that is not what was supposed to happen. That is not what his feet originally looked like. If you see them side by side, you can really see the difference between the approach that Donatello's taking versus Michelangelo in their Davids. Donatello's was riddled with the Medici propaganda, with the Florence versus Milan ideas, that boyish charm, that kind of homosexual and homoerotic push in the like secret way they're going about the anatomy and the figure, versus Michelangelo's very more Greek, Roman, contrapposto, S-curve, strong, capable. We're not seeing Goliath here. We don't know who the Goliath is. Just looking at it, it's focusing on the physique, the body, the expression. To kind of understand how these sculptures were made, I like to look at undone, unfinished sculptures where you can see where Michelangelo's kind of carving that rock in and around those figures. He also did a lot of sketches and studies. Before he would do any painting or sculpting, he would always go to real life models, and he would focus in on understanding those tiny and anatomical things that you wouldn't just notice. Like look at the feet. Like he wasn't getting that foot right the first time. He's like, that's weird. Oh, it's weird. So he kept trying on the foot. So when you don't get something right, just know, not even Michelangelo could paint toes perfectly on the first try. Carving marble is absolutely insane. I highly recommend watching this. I'll probably show it in class at some point to really showcase how marble is carved. You start with your big block of stone, you draw out where everything's gonna be, and then you start chiseling away with some like toothy forms and just start hacking away carefully until it is ready to be refined into a non-loading internet. So even her work is a little, like, it's very well done, but you can see it's a little bit more abstracted, stylized, left with that rough marble, where Michelangelo never left that rough marble on purpose. And then just going through a few of his others, just to show again that anatomical knowledge. The neck there is always crazy to me. We're seeing that anatomical perfection. This is an area that he designed the entire interior for. And then we get to the Sistine Chapel. So finally, the 251. So, Sistine Chapel. Even though Michelangelo is a sculptor, he is probably best known for his work in the Sistine Chapel. As far as the identification goes, you are good with just Sistine Chapel. He did the ceiling and the wall frescoes around the altar. He did not do the entire chapel. That's why it's saying it that way, because he didn't do the walls here or here. But I'm pretty sure shorthand, Sistine Chapel, you're good. This is in Vatican City, which is where the Pope lives, because this was a commission from the Pope. He actually came back. He did this project in two different phases. First one, he did the ceiling, this section right here, 1508 to 1512. So it took him 4 years to finish this. He worked on it pretty much every day, hated everything for it. And then the Pope loved it so much, they invited him back to do this back wall. So 1536 to 1541, he did the altar frescoes. So right there. So this is Sistine Chapel ceiling. kind of unrolled, almost like this is the pendentive over here. It's kind of funky looking. So just know that the ceiling is curved as a barrel vault. See the barrel vault? And this is it uncurled, so you can see the figures a little bit better. Just taking a look at some close-ups. We're going to look at her a little bit closer. The Delphic Sibyl god is being portrayed in a human form in this. You see a lot of this trompe-l'oeil. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. Trompe-l'oeil? Don't know. But the Fool's the Eye, that's not marble. That's not marble. That's all fresco. This shadow, everything, that's paint. There's nothing three-dimensional. So that's all Fool's the Eye. Creation of Adam. That's kind of a big piece. Hopefully you guys have seen this before. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. But this is on right smack dab in the middle of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Here's kind of a different viewpoint from around the altar. So you can see Creation of Adam's just one of various many other paintings. And this one also kind of shows that the difference of the other artists that painted the walls before it. Because Michelangelo took 4 years to do this, I believe he was in his 20s for this one too. On the first go around, his art style does change pretty dramatically throughout this entire project. It's really fun to look at the Sistine Chapel and kind of see that art style shift. So the earlier stuff, yes, everything is really anatomical, but it doesn't feel the same as like Creation of Adam. And then the last judgment scene here in the altar fresco is so crazy. This is later, right? He's older at this point, coming back, and his style changes so dramatically that they count it kind of as a separate piece within the 250. So kind of crazy. Just blocked out some faces so you can see the scale of it. Some stuff to note. You don't have to write this unless you want. Stuff to note prior to his commission of the chapel. So he gets commissioned by the Pope. He's done David at this point. David was a huge success. Like I said, the person who commissioned him loved it, kept it down. He also was then commissioned to paint this battle scene to the right for the Florentine government. So this Battle of Cassina. So by working in Florence, Michelangelo, he's a rising star. People are loving him. But he is now in direct competition with Leonardo da Vinci. Like I said, these guys are talking. They're not by themselves. And Leonardo had done a different battle already on the opposite wall. So their art's literally like facing off in each other within the same spheres. So you have Michelangelo kind of having to step up his game for the slightly older Leonardo da Vinci. So we see this like cartoon drawing sketch to make sure that he's going well prepared into doing this work. Prior to competing with da Vinci, he's prepping himself. He's the rising star artist. They're both going head to head. It's really fascinating, kind of weird art world moment there. But within this, Michelangelo decides that he really likes sketching the male nude, and he likes using the male nude in his art. So most of his art is going to focus on male nudity. Even when it's a female, it's technically male nudity somehow. I'll explain. But part of the reason for this is that Michelangelo loves the look of the muscle structure and the light that bounces on each different part of the body. It's this beautiful moment of human. And Michelangelo also, he likes looking at naked men. So it worked out both ways for him, if you catch on. All right, so now we're getting into the actual Sistine Chapel. The notes are a little bit more intense, so I apologize. So reminder, you can always just summarize. Important stuff is generally either bolded or separated out like this. So context. Michelangelo, rising star, great. Pope Julius II, the guy on the right here, he is the one that commissions Michelangelo, says, I want the 9 stories of the book of Genesis which includes things like the creation of Adam. So this is Old Testament stuff. He wants it nice and on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, because the Sistine Chapel before, it was kind of boring for the Pope's taste, as the High Renaissance has led people to go like, oh, art can be even better. So the Sistine Chapel before, I'm going to come back, looked like this. I know this is black and white, but pretend for me. The ceiling was all blue, and it had the little white dots. Blue, white dots. Sounds kind of familiar. Kind of sounds like Giotto's Scroveni Chapel ceiling that was very popular. It's almost like it was a style or something, because it's the night sky, stars on blue, right? So, right, blue ceiling, white dots, it's stars. So the stars ain't doing it for the Pope anymore. He wants cute new frescoes in the barrel vault. And he also kind of just wants the Sistine Chapel to be this place for study and for people to come in and be able to kind of learn art from Michelangelo's art, if that makes sense. And that does happen. A lot of artists, they're just studying each other. They're, sitting down, drawing and sketching the statue of David to learn about anatomy, because they don't have access to dead bodies like Da Vinci or live models. Maybe they're just up and coming. So you learn based off of other people's art. It's fan art, right? So the Pope wants a place where people can learn. So Michelangelo takes it from this and turns it into this. So this is where you could see the walls, they were done, they were untouched. That's the Michelangelo part. And you could really tell in the Trompe-l'oeil difference, like look at the marble up here, look at the marble on the side. Michelangelo's a better painter. I know, hot takes. All right, so how do you paint a ceiling? Typically, today, we use scaffolding and ladders. And in Michelangelo's Renaissance time, he used scaffolding and ladders. Crazy, right? So Michelangelo was working, lying on his back or looking up for 4 years. Yep, like every day for 4 years. So here's some artist renditions and idea of what his scaffolding looked like. So you get a sense of how close he is, lying on his back, painting, arm sore, plaster dripping onto his face as he works every day on this. Minus holidays. He gives himself some free time. But it's crazy. He had others that helped, like he's not going to climb down the ladder every time he has to change pigment, but he's the one painting. Absolutely insane. When we look at the overall visuals of the Sistine Chapel, just overall, not the individual pieces, this is absolutely revolutionary. He is creating deep, rich, beautiful colors, beautiful anatomy, beautiful perspective that looks so realistic, all on fresco. And that's that idea where he's carving figures out of paint. Again, not literally, but he's putting down the colors in such a way that it feels more full, more form. It's chiaroscuro, but it's even more than that. He is sculpting out those figures. And when he paints, he does these figures that are very massive, but they have a sense of gravity. They have a sense of weight. They're going to defy some of the gravity sometimes, but there's a sense that they are whole. They are almost always idealized, which most Renaissance artists are doing idealized. But he's really focusing on that perfection within the muscle structure, the light, all of that, especially all the anatomical stuff. His anatomy is not just like, I'm just going to draw good anatomy, though. It's very posed in a way to show off drama, to show off power. Muscle is strong. It is beautiful. So he's showing off the strength, the beauty, the harmony, the unity, all with how they're posed to give them a sense of drama. It feels almost like you're looking at a stage and seeing a story. But in this case, with the Sistine Chapel, we have separated scenes. You're reading it like a comic book, but watching it like a play. He's also bringing in Rome and Greece, not just in his anatomical structures and the way he's approaching art, but he's bringing in actual Greek and Roman stuff with it. So the sculptural style we're going to see kind of in that marbling, that fake marble. There's going to be some Greek and Roman looking figures there. He's bringing in literal Greek and Roman traditions like the Sibyl, which are these future seers, to accompany this Christian story. He's blending Christianity and Greek and Rome mythology together. Because we're looking at Old Testament, we are not seeing Christ, but all of the kind of lead up to Christ. And then because the figures are so big, we get a sense of that kind of emotional impact, even though the ceiling is so high up. So he has to paint these figures bigger because people can't see them otherwise. So he's being very smart, very careful with everything. The narrative, the way it works, is separated into 3 sections. So 3, Holy Trinity again, right? So we see the creation of heavens and earth. Then we have the creation of Adam and Eve and the expulsion from Garden of Eden. And then you have Noah and the Great Flood. So that's kind of the overarching story there. In between each of those, we have Ignudi, because they're nude, ignorant nudes, nude youths, right? So Ignudi are sitting in between the frescoes, accompanied by prophets and sibyls. Those are the thing I just mentioned. So prophets are Christianity, and then sibyls kind of came from Rome, but are incorporated into Christianity that kind of tell this like Christ is coming kind of prophecy. But prophecies themselves, very Greece and Rome. And those guys are in the spandrels, which is kind of that in-between area, as well as those pendentives. The pendentives themselves tell the story of the salvation of Israel. Again, Old Testament. So every single section of this is painted. So you can see, if you want every individual thing, you can see exactly where everything's at. It's a little overwhelming. Again, this is a barrel vault, so this is it uncurled. So think of how like a globe gets uncurled to show off the map. Like that. Continuing forward with context. Context relating around to his actual painting. So when he starts painting the ceiling, he's using a very traditional method of cartoons where all the sketches are done ahead of time. And then he transfers the design onto wet plaster, because this is a fresco. And then he's rubbing the cartoon into the ceiling. However, once he's like getting the hang of it, he is freehanding it. He's just going in, go for it. I'll just put the sketch down, it's fine, whatever. So he's gaining confidence as an artist even through this. He claims that he worked without assistance. There's conflicting evidence. Most artists had assistants. Like, that was just a thing. But he was also very private. To me, he always read as like super introverted. Maybe mental health something. I can't say for sure, then I can't diagnose someone that's 500 years dead. But definitely very introverted. He was very private, didn't like people seeing his stuff, which Raphael kind of pushed him on a few times. And he did take over 4 years to paint. He didn't want to do it. He hated painting. He's like, I can paint fine, but like, that's not my thing. Don't you want me to do sculpture or something? I'll do some architecture for you. But no, the Pope's like, no, Michelangelo, I want you. You're going to be my painter. And he's like, fine. I can't turn down the Pope because that's Pope money. You don't want to turn down Pope money. And doing a painting of a ceiling for 4 years is rough, especially when painting is not the thing that brings you joy. So he even wrote about his own struggle, saying, with my beard towards heaven, I am bent like a Syrian bow. Because he's lying on his back all day long and his back's hurting, right? So he's writing poetry about how much it sucks to have back pain. Which mood? This is one of my most interested details here is the muscular figures. So we see these muscular figures throughout the entire city. It's inspired heavily by Laocoon, so our guy from before, and he's using live models to do this. He's getting live models, he's doing these sketches, but he is using male models. It was not okay for females to model naked, but he needed naked models to get anatomy right. So he's using men, there's the man, and then adding very minimal changes to make it more feminine by just putting the figure in a dress, basically. So this is where we're really seeing, sorry, there was a weird cut there. So this is where we're seeing how Michelangelo is approaching the human form. It is not overtly feminine like we saw with Donatello fixing this, but something more masculine looking. The muscle structure, the positioning of the body all reads a lot more manly. The placement of like how the calves are built because of the different muscle forms that build up. He is clearly using a male model here and just trying to translate that into a female form. So that's very much from his life study. And we see that throughout the entire thing. All of the women are portrayed in this more kind of masculine way because of his own personal life models, aesthetics, etc. Women also were not like seen as able to be live models, especially for naked figures. It wasn't as acceptable because women had to be modest. So anytime you see that woman, it's going to be a male model for him. And you can see that a lot throughout in all the muscle structure. Like that is a woman there, reading much more masculine. Here's the kind of edge here, and then middle bit here, just more close-ups, kind of seeing it evolve. He starts early on the left side and then moves through it in the 4 years to the right side, so you really get a sense of his early work versus his later work, just moving throughout the piece. And that brings us to one of the sections known as the Deluge. The Deluge is one of the, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, so I apologize. The Deluge is one of the earlier fresco pieces he did in the Sistine Chapel. Compositionally, it's a lot more traditional in a sense. It's not one large figure or just two large figures. It is a lot more chaotic. You have that nice diagonal. You have this kind of three mass, a lot of small figures. It's not thinking so much as the people on the bottom looking up. He's not doing this like gigantic scale of these people quite yet, but he's still telling that narrative. So we're seeing kind of a more grayish sky, not those bright colors that he usually uses. We see this chaos of the dead tree, kind of showing that fear, that chaos again, as people are trying to climb upon the side of the mountain. The boat's capsizing, people are falling, they're trying to rush to salvation. So people trying to work together to seek sanctuary. It's very clustered, very chaotic, both in the narrative of the story we're seeing, as well as that composition. So a lot of people grouped together. So this contextually kind of ties into that idea of the flood, and Noah and the flood and so on and so forth, of people perishing who did not believe in God. This is Old Testament God. Old Testament God tends to be a little bit harsher. And the idea of the flood was to kind of wipe out the entire population except for Noah and the family, wiping away sins. It's kind of more of a story for refreshing and rebuilding from a clean slate. So we're trying to see that within the deluge here. So that chaos of getting through that flood. Boop. What's interesting about the deluge is that he actually paints the Sistine Chapel within the piece. So you see people trying to seek salvation with the chapel. So this is the chapel, what it looks like in real life, and this is his fresco painting there. So you really get that sense of seeking salvation within the building that it's being painted. So he's doing it very purposely. there's a lot more of those muscular female figures and just muscular people in general. He's doing this classical nude. Some are clothed, most are not, and that's harkening back to the Greece and Rome. Here's close-up. Color's not too great on this, but you can get a better sense of the muscle structure. He understands muscle, he emphasizes muscle. This one's looking a little bit more feminine, but again, kind of pulling from those male models. As the work evolves, there's Deluge, there's Creation of Adam. He's painting for 4 years. He does take a break in 1510. And the frescoes after that time, super different. So this is before 1510, this is after 1510. So he, does that whole thing some of you artists may have experienced, or you'll experience it in the future, in which you stop drawing for a while, or you stop working on a project for a bit, step away, come back, and all of a sudden, like, you leveled up. You gained experience points. It's magic. The amount of times I just got better somehow feels so magical. Same thing happens with Michelangelo, and this is a master painter, right? But he really finds his style and what he likes and how to do his compositions more purposely. Great composition, very chaotic, but it's so far away that it doesn't read as clearly as the Creation of Adam here. So he's doing bigger figures, they're more idealized, they're very monumental. So like a monument's big, right? So monumental figures. Then we're gonna slide into looking at those Sibyls, the future seers. There's that one that we keep looking at, the one that we saw the sketch with the toes. He figured out the toes, good job for him. These are all female figures, and they are all using male models. I think this one, probably one of the more obvious male models, the way the head is done, especially. She's a little more feminine, but it's still like in that, the chest area doesn't quite make sense to what like would be portrayed with an actual female model. So he's getting close with the female model, but he's doing it through the lens of very anatomically accurate male models, with some emphasis. He also, because he's a sculptor, I love this, he would do mock-ups out of marble for his painting so that he could better capture the light and the shadow. So yes, he's doing live model stuff, but he would occasionally sculpt what he's trying to paint so that he has a better sense. If you actually look up Disney maquettes or any animation maquettes, they'll make sculptures of the animated characters that are just live model, like just real models, right? That they would then use to animate. Not as a stop animation, but just as a figure for reference, for lighting, for poses, all that kind of stuff. It's really cool to look at. So Disney maquettes, if you're interested. Here's another one of those Sibyls. Again, kind of seeing that more masculine look to him. Her. But a little bit older figure. So he's playing with the wrinkles. He's pulling down the weight of the skin. You get a sense of gravity as she's sitting there. It's very like heavy feeling through composition and through accuracy, even though if you're really looking at how these Sibyls are sitting, doesn't really make sense to, like, would she actually be able to hold herself up sitting like that? Not so much. So he's playing with the perspective that people are seeing looking up. He's playing with the position of the body. He's emphasizing composition. He's emphasizing different details like heads or hands or feet, just like he did with David, to get the most out of the storytelling as possible. It's kind of insane. And then framing them all in this marble, trompe-l'oeil, so that it looks like they're sitting within marble statues when it's all just really well rendered and well modeled fresco paint. So if we dive into a couple of the Sibyls in particular, we're looking at the Delphic symbol, Delphic as in Delphi, Greek place. We see kind of a circular composition here following the fabric, right? And then following through the scroll, and we get that circular composition, gives her a sense of unity, of purity, of spiritualness. Same thing from like Asia, kind of translates here as well, not as much that celestial, but circles feel nice, feel peaceful. She's sitting in that geometric architectural setting. She has very powerful arms. There's some like heft to her body. She feels like an imposing force, and you even have her knee coming at you from above. So she feels like she could just like both topple out and stay grounded within her seat. So there's a tension there between her and the viewer. He really tried to get kind of that grace and harmony. Her expression is a little bit softer, but it's watching, it's seeing the oncoming of Christ. And this whole idea of how he's painting is known as sprezzatura. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but sprezzatura is that deceptive ease. This is really hard to paint. It's crazy. And it's hard to sit that way. But he is capturing it so it feels like, yes, of course anyone can sit that way. And of course anyone can just like look like this. This painting is easy. It feels effortless, even though this is really hard to get the marble looking right, to get her looking right, to have her sit in such a way that feels right and yet isn't. Crazy. So here's where you can definitely see the male model used. Here is that. You can kind of go back and forth. One of his practices of the Sibyls. Because they were future seers in Greece and Rome, especially Delphi, like Oracle of Delphi, for the Sibyls to be accepted within the Sistine Chapel and Christianity, there's this shift to say the Sibyls foresaw Christ. And that helps the Christians consolidate that Sibyls can be used. And they saw Jesus is coming. So even in Old Testament, the Sibyls foresaw that Jesus is coming. So you have the Sibyls there within the Sistine Chapel, painting, kind of referencing the New Testament while portraying the narrative of the Old Testament. And then all these Sibyls were painted after, especially like the Delphic Sibyl was painted after that break, so you see that more monumental style again. This is not confirmed, by the way, the Belvedere torso, so this is, I was totally wrong, which is really fun. This is actually a sculpture that was a lot earlier, and he could have used it in addition to his models, but he did also sculpt. This one's just not his. I forget the things that I put in myself. I apologize. Then we go to the Libyan Sibyl, so another Sibyl. Just quick going over her again. We do see this nice S curve that's very exaggerated. We see that sprezzatura again. Look at how she's sitting. That does not make sense. I can't be on my tippy toes and hold up a giant book and turn and like have this ease while my foot's all pranced on a little tiny box and sitting on a ledge. That's crazy. No one's sitting like that. And yet it feels right. It feels easy. It feels comfortable, even though it's very contorted. This kind of style is going to be picked up by the Mannerists later on. And then Raphael is actually going to sneak his way in. The other Ninja Turtle we haven't talked about. He's going to sneak his way in. He's going to see all of the work Michelangelo does. He sees the weight that Michelangelo puts, the monumental size of sitting on the steps and all that kind of stuff. And he's going to be inspired by Michelangelo's work and use kind of that same concept in his stuff and ends up painting Michelangelo in this kind of type of position within the painting we're going to talk about next. Restoration also happened on Sistine Chapel. It was pretty much covered in soot, like nasty soot. Industrial Revolution was not kind to old buildings and old paintings. So there was a big cleaning. People were mad because do you risk the artwork? What if you took away too much? Especially with a fresco, it's really hard to do. But they did restore it. It does look a lot cleaner, a lot nicer now. Is there stuff lost? Always, but it's better, I think, personally, than the nasty, sooty grossness. And then just to kind of show creation of Adam, since that's the most famous aspect, here's some drawings that he did, so that preemptive work there. There's that torso again to see how he kind of based it off of that older statue. You can see that composition sitting within all that fake marble, all the ignudi around, again, the youthful nudes. Here's the entire composition. Here's close-up of God, and then the touching, almost touching of the finger. And because of that negative space, you really get that sense of tension of like it's almost going to happen. So the story here with the creation of Adam is this is God, this is Adam, the first man, and God is giving life to humans. And he's kind of being carried away through this celestial robe and all these celestial beings. So you get this sense of weightlessness as God gives life to humanity through Adam. And that's what the touch is. He is creating Adam in his image. So they lock eyes. It's very similar. They kind of echo each other without being exactly the same. They get the same treatment of paint, etc. But there's also this fun little extra theory around the celestial robe behind it, in which Michelangelo was an architect. He was a math guy. He was a science guy. He really liked to express his thoughts within his work, and he would hide secret messages. So one of those secret messages is that this is a brain, that God is kind of wrapped up within a brain, and each section highlighted by the figures and the overall shape represents different parts of the brain. It lines up really nicely, so everyone kind of accepts this as fact. And it gives that blend between science, logic, reason, humanities, art, creativity, and it's all coming together where every vision, every part of the composition meets here at that touch between God and Adam. And that's for fun. It's an important part about the piece, a little touch. And then just showing some more close-ups, some ignudi, based on Laocoon potentially, more ignudi. There's Prophet Jeremiah, that effortless sprezzatura again. Here's another detail where you see the original sin. Female is a little bit more female this time. This is in contrast to earlier depictions of Adam and Eve. So kind of seeing how he's depicting more of the compositional side of it. Then, shift gears. That's all like the main Sistine Chapel. There's still the entire altar wall. This thing is dense. So I apologize that this video is long, but it's dense. So we have the Last Judgment. So Michelangelo, he finishes up the Sistine Chapel. He's done. He's like, okay, my back, it's good again. I'll be able to live another day. And the Pope's like, you know what, Michelangelo? You did such a great job. Why don't you come back? So, new Pope. Rome has fallen at this point. So, Rome falls 1527. Mentioned that towards the beginning. And the church kind of has to inherit this crisis of Rome falls, new Pope. Oh God, the Protestant Reformation happens. The Catholic Church is kind of going insane at this point. They're dealing with a lot. They're putting out a lot of fires. So in part of trying to kind of help ease Christians and people around the area into feeling more comfortable, Pope Paul III commissions this piece here. So it's one of those moments of like, he didn't actually solve anything. He just tried to distract people with pretty images. But hey, Michelangelo got paid some more, so yay, artists. Woohoo. But when you are the Pope and people are breaking away from the church and Rome is fallen and you're like, what art do I want? How about we do art of the end of the world? Yay. So we're getting the Last Judgment scene as a reaction to that kind of overwhelming feeling of, hey, don't stop being Catholic, because reminder, if you're not a true believer, Christ isn't going to save you when the world ends. That's setting the stage for what Michelangelo does with the Last Judgment. At this point, it's been some years. 1534 to 41 is when he is painting this. It's been a little bit of time. Michelangelo's older, he's a different man, and he's approaching all of this in a completely different way than what he did with the ceiling. He was not happy about painting it again. He's not a painter, but he's got to go where the money goes. So instead of these like big monumental figures, he's portraying the whole altar scene as one giant narrative. The figures are small again, and they are even more muscular, like almost a gross amount of muscular. I personally don't like looking at the muscles on this one. It's very emphasized. That's what he cared about, was all the muscle structures, so that's what he's going to push forward. So fill in the blank wise, we look at and we're breaking down the different aspects of the Last Judgment. We see up here angels carrying the 4 instruments of passion, the passion of the Christ, not just of passion in general. We have the cross itself, the crown of thorns, the lance, and the flagellation column. Flagellation means like self-beating. Yay! So the theme of this section is torture. Crucifixion we see often just as portraying Christ, but it is a horrendous punishment, and the crown of thorns placed on Christ's head, causing him to bleed as he has to carry his own cross. And flagellation is something early Christian monks would do to themselves in response to like kind of replicate the pain that Christ went through. So all very painful stuff to show that reminder of where Christ had come through and the suffering that people have gone through, so you know what you're trying to not avoid, because it's the idea that Christ died for your sins, so you don't have to go through it too. So it's a reminder for you don't have to go through this. This is Christ in the center. This is like Superman Christ. Very, very muscular. And it's very strange to have Christ being depicted in this kind of nudity. Like, we've seen him naked before. This robe actually was added later when they did the whole leaf thing and covered up bits. So Christ's bits were originally out. And the church was like, whoa, no, that's not good. No one wants to see Christ's bits. That's a little too much. But remember, Michelangelo and Leonardo were not like super Christian people. They're doing it for the art. So we have these super muscular bodies. That's just a Michelangelo signature. But we get Christ looking down, and in this pose, that's that same sprezzatura, where it's this effortless ease, even though it's difficult. And by lifting his hands up as such, there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of defiance as he's casting his judgment. This is not a kind Christ. This is one that's ready to take the people that do deserve it to heaven and cast the sinners down to hell, which is very what the Pope was feeling at the time, right? And then Mary on the side, we can tell from being close to Christ and having that blue there. We have St. Peter. He's got the keys to the kingdom of heaven. He represents the church. So the church itself, the Catholic Church, all of that, the Pope is kind of putting himself as that head of church, as the head, as the person with the keys to heaven. So Peter's representing that. So if you follow Catholicism, that is the only way to get to heaven. And Peter's looking kind of mad about it. He's very angry. It's not, again, this is not a kind scene. The Last Judgment is always very intense, but this one is even angrier than usual, reflecting both Michelangelo's feelings and the Pope's feelings at the time. Speaking of Michelangelo's feelings, we have St. Bartholomew here with a knife and a flayed skin. That flayed skin is Michelangelo. So this is a self-portrait of Michelangelo, matches up his facial hair and hair. and it's said that he portrayed himself in this like sack of skin just to talk about how much he has suffered following the sack of Rome, how much his life has gone to crud, how he's feeling. He doesn't like doing the paintings. His home and where he worked, it got taken over. The Pope is commissioning him to do this kind of propaganda piece. He's not in a good place, and he portrays himself in that way. So very intense self-portrait, very kind of modern feeling. Towards the bottom, right below Christ, we have some wingless angels, so we're not seeing the typical wings, but we do see their trumpets, which is calling the dead to rise, so bringing up the souls. And then we have this difference between those that are going to go to heaven versus those that are going to go to hell. So heaven's going to be more towards the left-hand side, hell's going to be more towards the right, but mostly up heaven, down hell. Not a big surprise. Speaking of hell, oh look, we have Charon. Charon is the ferryman of Greek mythology. So we're sneaking in some more Greek mythology. He's the one that sails people on the boat down the river Styx, their souls off to the underworld. So Charon, is being depicted here, also guiding souls to the underworld. But this time, underworld is hell. So then we're looking at those going to hell. We see those on the right-hand side, or Christ's left, are being dragged by demons. Demons are dragging people off down to hell. People are trying to escape. They're screaming. It's scary. We're seeing the sins being played through pride, trying to fight back. You're not gonna win against divine judgment, and yet they are. So that's why they're going to hell within just that moment. So overall, we're seeing a lot more chaotic kind of changes to Michelangelo's work. I think this section here also very intense, where you see that true anguish. It's not realistic anymore. It feels very stylized in a realistic way. It's very strange to look at. So we're seeing kind of this counter-reformation, which we'll talk about, and how the Catholic Church is trying to fight back against people leaving the church to a different church. It's complicated. We'll talk about it closer with Northern Renaissance and Baroque. Also, this very uncomfortable snake bite is talked about a lot in the art historical stuff, because he's like unbothered and yet demon and human and not. It's very, very uncomfortable, this whole scene. He's still using male models, so you can really see that, and then we see some close-ups on the closer ascension to heaven there. Finally done with Michelangelo. That is a hefty piece that, 250s in quotation marks, because that was a lot into one. But finally, last of our high Renaissance, we have Raphael. So Raphael, I like to describe as kind of like the femboy of the high Renaissance people. This is his painting that we're going over. It is another fresco, so still back in the fresco zone. It is outstanding in the perspective. We have that trompe l'oeil again, and this is known as School of Athens. So School of Athens, Raphael, 1509 to 1511, so it took him 3 years to paint, and it is that fresco. So a little bit about Raphael, just getting into it. Here's some self-portraits. This is why I describe him kind of as that femboy. When he did School of Athens, he was only 26 by the end of it, so that's, ages 21 in 1506. Here, this is how he looked, and then this is him in School of Athens, age 26. So he was very young, just like Michelangelo was. They really did crazy amount of work very young. This is why these Renaissance people, they trained very early on, but they're also got some insane talent mixed in there. Here's a self-portrait he drew at age 14. Crazy. So you can see that Raphael is very, very talented, works hard, has tons of skill, just like Michelangelo, just like Leonardo. He often gets kind of left out of the big talks of Renaissance people, so just showing off, he knows what he's doing. To me, Raphael is primarily a painter. That is first and foremost, Raphael is a painter. I adore his works of Mary and Christ, especially the more motherly ones. We'll actually get to see one in the Norton Simon. Super excited about that. But his work is just so soft. There's a comfort to it. He's not doing the full like sfumato that Da Vinci's doing it. You could see clear separation. But it just has this air of calm, of niceness. The blending is smooth and yet it's rich in the colors. That's a lot of his work, is that nice, soft look. Very detailed. He was also an architect, not as much as Michelangelo, but he did do some architectural work. So here's some designs and some work that he did. And he also did prints. He was a printmaker. So printmaking, always good for selling work and mass producing, so he did some of that. A lot of clear sense of chiaroscuro in his printmaking. When he first started early on, Raphael was within that tradition of everyone else, where it was that profile. This is again why Mona Lisa looks impressive. We have atmospheric perspective, but it's not that real groundbreaking style quite yet. He learns from Perugino. This one is, I believe, in the Sistine Chapel on the lower level, or something familiar. This is Raphael's on the right, so he's learning linear perspective from his teacher. He's taking it and he's building off of what his teacher is doing and focusing more on those soft figures. So from there, that's where Raphael really hits his stride. So he's 18, 19 in this era, right? So crazy amount of skill, such soft transparencies. Mary with a very, very thin halo. Christ is a full baby. This is a mother and son. There is this sense of separation in divinity through that halo, through this translucent fabric, and through the kind of gaze, but it still feels welcoming. It still feels like a mother watching over her son and son playing with friends. He's being inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. Raphael was someone who listened and learned and observed from other master teachers. So he's playing with that pyramid composition, but you can also see how da Vinci's pyramid tends to be typically, in my opinion, stronger, but the composition is a lot cleaner with Raphael, typically when you're looking at those kind. By the end, Raphael's Madonna paintings really evolve into something a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more theatrical, instead of just pastoral. The putti down here are kind of a famous takeaway from Raphael's work. I had them in my house before at one point. They're really pretty. I like them. They're just so sweet. They're so human. Here's some more Madonna and Child. With how much Raphael paints Madonna and Child, you would, and other like figures, here's another one, you would think that they would pick a Madonna and Child for him, but School of Athens is like crazy important, like brilliant piece. Here's some other portraits that he did that are more of that traditional after Mona Lisa. See, 3/4, slight smile. It's like he changed the game or something. Here's another one, fresco versus the painting, which he is inspired by Michelangelo. So more Michelangelo, more Raphael, more sketches from Raphael. This one I find is like so awe-inspiring, like the drama, the contrast. It's touching on almost that Baroque style we'll get to know, but not quite yet. It's got some flow. It's got the circular composition up at the top, the weighty composition on the bottom. Here's his sarcophagus, so you can actually go and see Raphael's little tomb there. Which brings us to School of Athens. So at this point, I would share with person next to you your one-pager for School of Athens. Compare notes, see what you guys came up with, because there's some important figures going on. I want you to highlight some of those important figures, and I'll talk through. So feel free to pause, take a break, talk to each other about School of Athens, and then click back through when you're good. All right, so either I assumed you paused or you didn't, and we're gonna keep going. So School of Athens sits inside of a small chapel, and it's actually one of 4 paintings that Raphael did, all within this chapel. So he's doing, look at this, this is not real marble. None of this is real marble. That's all fake painting, absolutely insane. He is kind of trying to echo the tile on the floor into his, paintings. This is the scale. It's a lot bigger than you think. So the bottom figures are life size. Absolutely crazy. So you're looking up at it, which explains the perspective that you're seeing. So you have this very clean perspective looking upwards. So the idea behind the room is that you're seeing different aspects of kind of learning and humanity. So the big fields that people would go into were things like theology, religion, philosophy, thinking, poetry, writing, and law, which is the justice practice. So each of them are major aspects of learning. We focus on the philosophy one because me and many other art historians would argue that this is the most successful piece. The linear perspective, the barrel vaulting, the detail, all the nuance in the piece, the figures that are being portrayed are so gorgeous and kind of capture that moment. Some close-ups though of the other ones, just so that you know. Theology, you can see a lot more use of gold, of Christian figures like Christ in the center, very different than Michelangelo's Christ. If you want the full walkthrough, you can take a look at the YouTube video. And then more YouTube video clips. Here's School of Athens again. This one kind of briefly goes through who each of these main people are. I'm going to talk those ones through in a little bit. So, fun thing about being a Ninja Turtle and knowing the other Ninja Turtles is Raphael adds our Ninja Turtles into the painting. So we have Plato and Aristotle, both Greek philosophers, so tying into the whole theme of philosophy, but Plato looks like Leonardo da Vinci. Remember the old beard? Yeah, so that's supposed to be Leonardo da Vinci, and he's discussing with Aristotle kind of the thoughts and feelings and ideas of Plato and truth, because Da Vinci himself was kind of portrayed some Neoplatonist ideas, so it ties into Plato, that we don't know the truth. Only the divine knows the truth. And then we have Heraclitus, which I honestly don't know too much about Heraclitus' story, but he is being portrayed by Michelangelo. You see that beard, the hair, looking close to that flayed skin, and look, he's got that whole weightlessness, that sprezzatura that Michelangelo liked to paint. So Raphael went in, took a little look-see at what Michelangelo was doing in the Sistine Chapel, hopped over right next door to this little chapel here, and painted Michelangelo in the signature muscle structure and tippy-toe weightlessness that Michelangelo liked to do, and he is very grumpy about it. Michelangelo was a grump. Great artist, but a grump. We have some other figures that he liked to do this double meaning, Euclid and Bramante, kind of together as one. So we have some mathematicians, and then he sneaks himself in. So Raphael does a little self-portrait in his painting, just like Michelangelo's flayed skin, but Raphael's feeling a little bit more comfortable with himself. He's not a flayed skin, he's just a man saying, hey, how you doing? The reason, besides it just looking like Raphael, we're gonna get to see this a few times in some paintings, is look at who's looking at you. In a crowd of people, if there's one person locking eyes with the audience, that's probably the artist. Not always, but usually. So it's a good sign. Raphael's one of the early ones to do that. So hopefully one pager kind of helps take care of it. Some big takeaways before I dive into our next section. Again, that linear perspective, that composition, the coffers, the barrel vault. It's echoing all of Greek and Roman architecture and fitting it within Trompe l'Oeil, within all of these groupings of figures. and giving this monumental scale to this moment of like Greek culture all coming together and it being the rebirth of Greece and Rome. The new Christian learners are getting to like see Plato, see Aristotle, see Socrates in here, there he is, and see all of these different figures really interacting. Oh, there's Socrates, my bad. See all these figures kind of interacting and having these great big giant moments. Like Epicurus was a big philosopher, Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem, Archimedes was an inventor, Diogenes is a whole diegetic thinking philosophy, Ptolemy, Zoroaster, that's a whole religion, is that guy. It's like these are all big figures that Raphael is collaging in together as if it was just in the moment. If you remember back, the Greek agra, remember the walkin' and talkin'? So Raphael's even capturing the way that the Greeks discussed with each other all of their ideas of just that kind of casual talking about philosophy, the way that philosophy sort of meant to do. These figures didn't all kind of interact at the same time, but it feels so effortless like they would. So he's capturing the core of philosophy as a method of studying and learning within Renaissance, within Italy, while also kind of portraying this new Renaissance way of looking at the Greeks. It's very Greek, but it's very Italy at the same time. So a really cool piece. Hopefully you found a lot of good stuff to put on that one pager. I'll check that next time. Oh my gosh, we are done with the High Renaissance. Crazy. So after you have finished up your High Renaissance packet, that is the biggest 3 artworks back to back. Is insane. We're gonna go ahead and shift gears over to the Venetian Renaissance or Venetian style. So go ahead and grab your Venetian Renaissance packet. Feel free to pause, catch up with High Renaissance first. I went a little insane on making these slides weird, so I apologize. But that's what they're gonna look like. So Venetian Renaissance. We only have one piece for Venetian Renaissance. Some background information about it. We're looking about 1500, 1550. Mentioned it earlier, but just as a reminder, we're looking at Venice. Venetian, Venice. Venice was a huge economical city-state, like powerhouse of the economy. It's coastal, it's right on the Mediterranean, it's got a big port for trade with Asia, right? So it brings a lot of money over to this particular region. Venice kind of shifts a little bit because the northern and western parts of Europe start doing a little bit better because Italy in the Renaissance really boomed, and Europe was still kind of scrounging after Rome had fallen forever ago and Gothic stuff was happening, right? Look at that map of early Holy Roman Empire again. It's a lot of cultures all mushing together. But they're starting to stabilize. And with them stabilizing, that means Venice has some competition. And also we start seeing that rise of colonialism. They discover the Americas, discovering quotation marks. So France, Portugal, Spain, England, little Germany, and then the Netherlands are all gonna really poof up into being really important, where Italy was kind of didn't have a ton of competition leading up on the global scale. So what does that mean for the Venetian Renaissance is that we are looking at more of a kind of superfluous style. It's very about just being excess. It is cottage court girly kind of style known as pastoralism. It has these warm and bright colors, lots of light. It's in pastures, so lots of nature. They're actually using oil paint where all the others in Italy were using, tempera paint. And it's really just about being chill, sitting outside, being all like sensual and peaceful and drinking wine, taking your clothes off, having parties. Everyone down in Rome and Florence can deal with their architecture and their big statues and all of the crazy, impressive stuff Da Vinci was doing. But here in Venice, we're just chill. We're partying. It's like wine mom meets college frat party? I don't know. That's bad. But here you can see it a little bit better, where it's just about chilling, naked, partying, having a good time. Cult of Dionysus kind of revives in this zone where people are just liking the idea of drinking and partying, which brings us to our one Venetian Renaissance piece, which is not primarily outside, but it is about nakedness, which is Venus of Urbino, or Urbino. I'm going to say Urbino. And our artist here is Titian, 1538, and we have oil on canvas. Again, Venetians loved oil. We see the rich, dark colors of our oil paint here, especially in those darker colors that really highlight that this is oil. Remember, we played with oil. It's rich. It's got some depth to it. Seeing a lot of detail here. Now, this is a little bit different for us. We've had a lot of nudity here, but this one's kind of very overt. So we're seeing a shift here between like our previous works, where even like the Birth of Venus, something feels a little bit more static than this more realistic depiction of a naked woman. But we are gonna talk about Birth of Venus again in a second to show off that shift even more. So Venus of Urbino is a really interesting piece, very large, and she's looking directly at the viewer. So she knows exactly what you're doing when you look at her. You have the little dog. It's a cute little dog. Dogs are usually a symbol of loyalty, but he's sleeping, he's just chilling, so you're seeing that sense of comfort, right? She's locking eyes with the viewer, like I said, so she is confronting that male gaze. The idea, again, is that portraying women naked opens up, viewers to be able to ogle, to look at her, to appreciate her body, whether it's, for artistic reasons or not so artistic reasons. So she's keeping that contact with the viewer to maintain that I know what you're doing kind of thing. And Titian was a really interesting artist because I love this piece, it's my favorite Titian piece. He really played up with the emotions and the drama. He does a lot of that kind of tenebrism stuff in his later works. He plays with a bit brighter colors in his earlier works. He really finds a home with oil. And he is one of the earlier people within the Renaissance time frame to really experiment with brush strokes. So the way I can tell a Titian piece is that it looks Renaissance, it's very realistic, it's rendered well, it's got that kind of hazy sfumato-esque, it's got the chiaroscuro, but there's a sense of like blurry brush strokes. The brush strokes are going to be very important as we break out of the Renaissance. We're looking at very smooth, clean brush strokes. Titian's starting to break from that. So you see other works here, it's a little bit softer, more playful. This one shows off those brush strokes pretty well. The images aren't the clearest on the planet, but you see he paints the female nude quite a lot in different poses. Also the male nude, he paints religious stuff, secular stuff, religious stuff in a way that doesn't feel religious. He does a lot. That's him right there. Hi, baby Titian. And then his signature right there. So we're going to learn about Venus of Urbino through our other Venus, Birth of Venus. Seeing them side by side, you can really see a lot of differences, but what exactly is different, what is similar? So, right from the get-go, we're going to look at some visuals. We're looking at early Renaissance Botticelli's Birth of Venus versus Titian's Venetian Renaissance Venus of Urbino. So Birth of Venus, painted with tempera, we see a lot of crisp contoured lines, so those little outline edges, pre-sfumato, right, versus Titian's painting with oils, we get a sense of luminosity. Luminosity, fancy word for just like the essence of light on things. So the like lumos, if you're a Harry Potter fan, right? Light. Lume is a word for light. So he's going through this method of glazing, meaning layers and layers and layers of the color to bring out the depth of that oil. And that's the fun thing about oils. You really get a rich depth if you do that glazing technique. It's soft, it's blended, it's a little hazy. It's kind of like that sfumato technique where you don't see those crisp edges. You can't really do that with tempera. Oil allows for that, where tempera, it's really hard to push it, which is why Mona Lisa's extra impressive, is that he did that with tempera, where oil, it's natural. It feels very easy. Next, Venus, Birth of Venus is very narrative. It's done in a very mythological way, where you see the landscape, you see these other figures. It's this moment from mythology, while Venus of Urbino is very different. It's very domestic. It's an interior. It's a house. There's some like maids in the background. She feels wealthy. She's sitting on a couch. She's got a dog. She's really chill. So it's not mythological. It's Venus, but is it? Then we have our Birth of Venus. She's mostly modest for a nude female. She's covering herself, both of her bits. But our Venus of Urbino, she's looking very seductive. She knows what you're looking for, and she's kind of offering it back in this very dynamic tension between her and the viewer. It's supposed to be seductive. She's not covering her breasts. She's still covering the other bits in reference to the typical Venus portrayal, but she's not doing so modestly. She's lying down on a couch. It's all very purposeful in that. And Titian's portraying her in this way. Some contextual differences. This is where it really kind of breaks and is interesting to me, is that we see this divergence between Birth of Venus, Neoplatonism. Big giant word, but Neoplatonism is that concept, again, of we don't know truth, only the divine know the truth. So within the truth, there is beauty. Complicated. But as artists are concerned, Neoplatonism usually focuses on how to get beauty to look as beautiful as possible. And that's taken different ways, where like Da Vinci did it in a mathematical way, Botticelli's doing it in a compositional way, and kind of just sensing of beauty as divinity itself. And Neoplatonism, the reason why Botticelli kind of focuses on that is because it's allowing for Christians to look at mythology and look at the naked body in a way that doesn't oppose Christian values. So you're allowed to look at a nude woman if it's a Venus, because it's divine, but not Christ divine. It's not about temptation. It's just about beauty. It's about enjoying the body in a very mathematical way, in a philosophical way, because philosophy's back and that's cool and stuff, but don't worry, it's not anti-Christian. It's a very interesting label for kind of dealing with all of those feelings, is Neoplatonism. Venus of Urbino, totally different. We have Venice itself being this in of itself beauty. So Venice, the city that, if you've ever seen like the pictures of Italy where you have the gondolas, like the little riverways between the buildings and stuff, that's Venice. Venice is gorgeous. And you get a sense of serenity. You hear the trickling water, you're elite sitting in this big house, having people take care of you. There's nothing Neoplatonist about this sense of beauty. It's just beauty for beauty. It's not philosophical beauty, it's just beauty. We have Cassone and Myrtle in the window, there, right there, suggesting that this is maybe related to marriage. you would find, this is weird, images like this of erotic nudes were left under lids of cassoni to encourage young brides to fulfill her love-making obligations. So basically tiny like erotic pornographic pictures to be like, hey, make the babies. Yeah, being a woman in this time period is real great. And then, so it's kind of referencing that. Here we see some similarities though. Both are being portrayed as Venus. They're titled Venus, which is the goddess of love, Aphrodite, right? Both visually are female figures in the nude. They're the focal point. So they're fulfilling the same compositional like purpose, right? You're looking at the female nude. And both actually have roses in the work attributed to the goddess of love. So you see some flowers. So there is that like, it's Venus. Other differences, by the way, not talked about visually. Composition. Look at how different the compositions are. You could talk about that for days. Different compositions. Anyway, contextually, sorry, that was a sidetrack. Contextually, similarities, both would have been seen by very small audience. So it would not have been approved by the church. The church is not okay with this. They know these kind of paintings exist, but they're not the ones buying it. So this is more for people's houses or for rich people parties. Like it's not going out and being displayed publicly. So it's more acceptable to have that female nude there because the church isn't watching and judging for that. Both were commissioned by wealthy patrons, so rich people buy paintings. Crazy. They may have both been related to marriage. Again, we're not exactly sure, but as goddess of love, she tends to get like tied into marriage at this point. They both may have had political meetings as well, kind of talking about the elite of Venice, of the not caring of the maids, or the loyalty of the dog. So the dog's sleeping, so she's not being loyal, and a lot of different symbolism. I'm losing my words. I apologize. The thing that I find real interesting about both Venuses is that Birth of Venus is very mythological. It is definitely like, this is Venus. However, if you are painting naked women, this is not acceptable, even within the small audience. Not acceptable to have like nude women constantly. It was very, very, very private to have those kind of pieces, very much seen as pornographic. So in these larger scale paintings, Venus of Urbino is a name that Titian could give it, and people be like, oh, okay, it's Venus, it's a Venus. That's fine. As long as it's a goddess and it's not just Lady of Urbino. Because if it's Lady of Urbino, oh my God, you're painting like a prostitute or something. We can't have that. And it becomes very controversial. You slap the name Venus on there, boom, everyone's chill with it, minus the church. So that also is kind of a similarity. By portraying Venus, it is now okay to look at that female form. Now, knowing these two different kind of portrayals of women, I want you taking a look at this piece and writing within the packet, who do you think made it and why you think made it? So visual contextual evidence. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and move on to our last packet, which is Mannerism. I made an ugly slide on purpose. Mannerism, I absolutely adore. It is one of those ones that kind of took my art in a very different direction when I was young and impressionable. So Mannerism. Some key things about Mannerism. Number one, this is a time period, about 1520 to 1600, where artists were kind of tired of having everything be absolutely perfect and mathematical, and I don't want to measure the fingertip to the end of the index finger and get every ratio right. That's boring and I hate it. So Mannerists are going to look at the figure and say, I want to paint people, but I want to paint them weird. I want to put weird garish colors. I want to make their necks really long or their bodies really long and make it really fake feeling, because that's kind of what art is. Like, why are we trying to capture reality? That's not the point of art. So Mannerists are going to really break all those conventions that the high Renaissance artists put forth in that short time period. Mannerists they just get tired of it. And you can really tell that difference when you have a Mannerist piece right next to like a high Renaissance piece. It's pretty funky. So when you first look at Mannerism, you're like, oh no, it just looks like the Renaissance. It's fine. It's great. And then you look a little closer. And then you look at, wow, Mary and Christ. What is happening with Christ? Why is he so long? That is a really long baby. His head is huge. His leg's really long. Is that even the same size leg? Why is his arm down there? Oh, Mary's normal though. Nope, she's got some AI finger looking things going on. Sorry to bring up AI in art history. That's icky. Her neck is extended. This position doesn't make sense. She's got that Michelangelo effortless thing going on, but it doesn't feel weighted properly because she's like scoot back. It feels uncomfortable. Same thing here where you have these slight distortions, like that hand doesn't quite make sense. Her head's kind of small, her neck's kind of chunky. Neck long, body long, neck long. Ghost child that is going to eat you if you close your eyes. Mannerism's weird. And the colors, like, woof, that red and that green, and that pink and the teal. Like, again, it looks right, but compared to the Renaissance, this is very garish. And they're trying to do that on purpose. So, Mannerists, you have to know this from Mannerism. It uses figura serpentinata. Figura serpentinata. Snake figure, serpent, figure, snake-like. They're elongated, like snakes. It's got odd depictions and interpretations of scenes, often used in the past. They're distorting space, so like, look at this. What's going on here? Why is she all big here? Why is he down there tiny? What is this? Why is that pillar there? That's the same height? That doesn't make sense. There's no linear perspective. What is this giant vase doing here? There's a lot of question marks with Mannerists. I also like his face just looking at us. There's weird lighting, like it's really bright there, but Christ is like glowing for some reason, and then there's like a creepy dark face down here. It doesn't match up. It's off-putting. It's people say cotton candy looking just because it's very bright and bold, but also not bright. It's kind of pastel. Look at how long his neck is again. The shoulders are wide and dropping. Fingers are kind of funky. Mannerism's strange, but I am so here for it. It's one of my favorite things on the planet. There's different ways of doing Mannerism too. There's a lot of like this bluish skin and just painting scenes weirdly, like why are there eggshells and why is there a goose that's attacking her breast and this dark thing here and this tiny dove and yet she's crouching and it's weird. Mannerism's weird. So to call myself out, I saw Mannerism. I was 18 and I was like, okay, yes. And I took every neck I ever drew and extended it like way too long. I am still trying to get past drawing too long of necks. I drew this one recently. That neck, it goes on forever. I can't help it. I'm sorry. Which brings us to our last piece, Entombment of Christ. This is by Jacopo da Pontormo. Pontormo is how we know him, 1525 to 1528, and it's oil on wood. So this is actually a wood panel oil paint. So we're again seeing that oil paint, that rich color. This is the size and scale of it. This is it being restored here. So you get a sense of it's almost life size to the figures, but not quite. And boy, oh, is it some funky stuff. I love Pontormo's work. Look at how Christ is being displayed. This composition's very hectic. We have lots of pinks, we have lots of teals and greens and all these colors that don't blend well together necessarily, but they feel right. Christ is not bathed in bright, beautiful colors. He's in this kind of drab brown. We're looking at a lamentation scene. Not quite fully the lamentation, but the entombment. So, backing up a second. Lamentation is Mary lamenting Christ's death. So it goes crucifixion, and then they take him off the cross, and then the lamentation, and then the entombment, where they're taking Christ away to be entombed. So putting him in his tomb, right? So this is right after lamentation, where we saw it with like Giotto's Scriveni Chapel. Now it's him being carried away. So we see that carrying away process. So here's some close-up. You see that grief from Mary. You see the grief of all these others. We have some weird floating figures, this both opaque and transparent fabric. This guy's just chilling. He's like, what's going on? Who am I? I didn't bring my Chromebook today. That kind of energy. He's wondering, can I even carry Christ? We see figures with their backs to us. Mary's face is like so raw in this one. You see the red around her eyes. She's just finished crying. She's going to cry again. Christ is dead. He's a little bit paler. You see the wounds inflicted upon him. It's not super bloody, but that color is drained, especially in contrast to Mary. So you see this kind of dead body. And we'll see the entombment again and again. This one more portraying that grief instead of the full entombing process, which we'll see in other pieces. So you're going to want to take some notes using the Smart History. So please make sure you get those visual contextual notes for that. To add upon the Smart History though, big visual stuff, Figura Subrentinata again, they're twisted. Christ's body, look at his feet pointed away, his face pointed towards. You see that snake-like figure there. Same thing with all the figures. We're getting that S curve, like on steroids. Everyone is curved, very snake-like. The arms are elongated, legs are elongated, bodies are elongated. We have very like perfectly oval heads, which heads are not perfect ovals. The colors are almost acidic, like if you have synesthesia, you could probably taste this painting pretty clearly. The space is really weird, like look at where everyone's feet lands, like it doesn't quite match up, and yet there's people floating. Like, are they human? Are they angel? They're not being portrayed as angels, and yet what is happening? And why is this cloud here? So it's giving this really weird sense of space, and the forms are overlapping in like almost predictable ways, but not quite. So it makes the viewer a little anxious. You're supposed to be uncomfortable when you look at it, which matches the uncomfortable feeling within the entombment scene. We also have kind of this empty void. Typically, when you're doing a composition, you're drawing the eye to a spot, the focal point, the emphasis, right? Often artists are going to put stuff in the center to bring your eye there. And if not, they're going to lead your eye to that focal point somehow. So whether it's linear perspective, movement, implied lines, radial symmetry, like literally whatever is going to bring you to that spot. However, because it's Mannerist and we like to make things uncomfortable, there's no clear emphasis here. You're supposed to see Christ, yes. He's contrasting, which is creating his emphasis, but he's not contrasting in a crazy way. Like I'm gonna break the slide real quick. If I even black and white this, you'll notice like with the color gone, that value, it's all the same, which is wild. And when you value it, oh look, my eye went down here. So there's no clear emphasis point, which again adds to the anxiety. So your eye is traveling through a lot more. There's still movement. You still see arms going around and following fabric and down, but it's a little more purposeless. This void is a particular reason. You got a bunch of hands, but there's nothing it's going towards. This guy, the I didn't bring my Chromebook guy, might be the artist. We're not sure. So again, it's that kind of anyone that sort of stands out could be that artist. We're not sure on that one. Context-wise, again, Mannerisms, that reaction to the High Renaissance. It was so about order and structure and balance, and I don't know about you guys, but when I'm told what to do for too long, I don't like doing it anymore. So Mannerists were like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. And it really elevates, especially following that sack of Rome again. So the Rome falls and people are messed up. Troops of Charles V are totally angered by not being paid for their services. They attack and they loot the city. Most of them were Protestants, so the Catholic churches, the art that was in them, they didn't care. They're going to destroy whatever. They're like, whatever, man, I just want to get paid. Which, on one hand, good for them, but also, please don't destroy art. So the Mannerists are kind of reacting to that. So it feels a little bit more artificial, right? The Catholic Church is creating and asking for art that is more distance building. Like early Christianity is all about kind of the love of Christ and bringing people in and all the stuff in between. And then this happens and it scares the leaders of the church. They're nervous. Protestant Reformation's happening. They're nervous. So now Christianity feels a little strange. So the Mannerists are also reacting to that strangeness. And again, going to keep getting back to it, but the Reformation and the Protestant Reformation are going to really impact a lot of our art, but we're going to save that full conversation for another day. Here's other work by Pontormo. This is probably his most famous one. We'll see. I'm pretty sure we'll see one at Norton Simon. If not, we'll look at it at the Getty again. But he does a lot of that elongation, that figura serpentinata. There's him. And those bright garish colors, green and orange together. Well, serving pumpkin, we love it. But that is it. This was an incredibly long video. Good luck, guys. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. Hopefully you enjoyed High Renaissance, Venetian Renaissance, and Mannerism. Thanks for watching.